The jar arrived on a Tuesday, 3 days before Christmas, and I almost didn't open the door. I'd been sitting in my kitchen with a cup of chamomile tea gone cold, watching the snow come down and soft, heavy curtains over the backyard I hadn't properly tended since my husband passed. The knock startled me. I wasn't expecting anyone. I never am these days. It was a FedEx driver, a young man with frost on his cap, holding a small brown box with my daughter's return address on it. I signed for it with a hand that wasn't quite steady. My name is Lorena Dare. I'm 63 years old. I live alone in the same house in Dayton, Ohio, where I raised 2 children, grew a garden, and buried a husband. My son moved to Portland 8 years ago and calls on holidays if he remembers. My daughter, I'll call her my daughter because that's what she is, even now. Even after everything, lives 40 minutes away with her husband and my 2 granddaughters. And until that Tuesday in December, I hadn't heard her voice in 14 months. 14 months. Not a word, not a birthday card, not so much as a text when my sister Viola passed in October and I sat alone at a graveside in Kentucky with nobody next to me who shared my blood. So when I saw her name on that return label, my first feeling wasn't warmth. It was caution. The kind of caution you learn after a long season of being hurt by someone you love. I set the box on the kitchen table and stood there looking at it for a good 5 minutes before I cut the tape. Inside, packed in a nest of red and green tissue paper, was a mason jar. The lid was sealed with a square of burgundy cloth held down by a rubber band, and a small handwritten tag dangled from it on a piece of twine. The tag said, "Homemade apple butter. Made with love. Merry Christmas, Mom." Her handwriting. I would know it anywhere. She made her capital M's the same way she did in 3rd grade. 2 peaks, the second one slightly taller than the first. I held the jar for a long time. Apple butter. I hadn't made it myself in years, but I remembered the smell of it from my own mother's kitchen. Cinnamon and brown sugar and something almost smoky from the long cook. I used to make it every fall when the kids were little. Spread it thick on toast on Saturday mornings while they watched cartoons in their pajamas. My daughter had always loved it. There was no note other than the tag. No phone number. No explanation for the silence. No acknowledgement that 14 months had simply vanished. Just made with love. Merry Christmas, Mom, as though we'd spoken last week. I didn't know what to do with that. I set the jar on the counter and went back to my cold tea and watched the snow and tried to figure out what I was feeling. It wasn't gratitude exactly. It wasn't anger either, though the anger was there, somewhere underneath, the way it always is, when someone wounds you badly and then acts as if the wound healed itself. What I felt, mostly, was tired and confused and lonelier, somehow, than I'd felt before the box arrived, because hope is a peculiar thing. Even a little bit of it, unexpected, can make you feel how much of it you've been missing. I didn't open the jar that night. I told myself it was because I wasn't hungry. That was only partially true. The fuller truth was this: I didn't know what that jar meant. I didn't know if it was a peace offering or a performance. I didn't know if my daughter had sent it out of genuine love or out of guilt, or because her husband had told her to, or because the holidays make people do sentimental things they don't actually mean. I didn't know if it was safe to hope. And so the jar sat on my counter, and I went to bed. And I lay awake for a long time listening to the snow and thinking about my daughter at 8 years old. The way she used to climb into my lap even when she was almost too big for it. The way she smelled like Johnson's shampoo and something sweet and entirely herself. The next morning I went to my church. I've been a member of Calvary Lutheran on Elmwood for 31 years. It's a small congregation, the kind where people know your name and remember your husbands and ask after your grandchildren with genuine interest. In the weeks before Christmas, the Women's Fellowship runs a food pantry drive and a bake sale every Saturday morning, collecting canned goods and homemade things to distribute to families in the neighborhood who are having a hard time. I'd been helping with it since before my daughter was born. I brought the jar. I almost didn't. I stood in my kitchen for 10 minutes, holding it, turning it over in my hands, reading her handwriting on that tag. Made with love. And then I thought, I don't know what this is yet. I don't know if I can eat it. Not until I understand what's happening. Not until she calls. I wrapped the jar in a dish towel, put it in my canvas tote bag, and drove to church. I gave it to my friend Winifred, who runs the bake sale table with the efficiency of a woman who has organized every church event for the past 2 decades. I told her it was homemade apple butter, brought in by a friend of mine. I didn't mention my daughter. Winifred thanked me, wrote out a little card in her neat cursive, homemade apple butter, $4, and set it on the table next to the fruitcake loaves and the peanut butter cookies. I thought that was the end of it. I stayed for 2 hours, helped sort donated cans of green beans and pumpkin puree, drank bad coffee from a paper cup, and talked to the pastor's wife about her new grandson in Cincinnati. By the time I drove home, my mind had quieted a little. Church does that for me. It always has. I was pulling into my driveway when my phone rang. It was a number I didn't recognize. I almost let it go to voicemail. Something made me answer. Mrs. Adair? A woman's voice. Careful, the way medical voices are careful. This is Deb Harkin. I'm a nurse at Miami Valley Hospital. I'm calling about a woman named Winifred Paulson. She listed you as an emergency contact. The world went very still. What happened? I said. My voice came out smaller than I intended. She was brought in about an hour ago. She's stable, but she's been experiencing nausea, vomiting, severe abdominal cramping. We're running some tests. She mentioned she'd eaten something at a church event this morning. Apple butter from a jar. She said she had about half of it on a biscuit. I sat in my car in my driveway with snow falling around me and I couldn't speak. Mrs. Adair, are you there? Yes, I said. I'm here. I'll come. I drove to Miami Valley in the state I can only describe as suspended. Not quite panic, not quite calm. Somewhere between the two where thought becomes very slow and very clear. I kept my hands at 10 and 2. I stopped at every yellow light. I told myself Winifred was stable. The nurse said stable. She was going to be all right. But the whole way there, a thought was circling in the back of my mind, quiet and dark, like something moving just below the surface of water. Half of it on a biscuit. She'd had half of it on a biscuit. She'd had half of it on a biscuit. I hadn't eaten any. By the time I reached the hospital, Winifred was sitting up in a bed in the ER, looking pale but alert, with an IV in her arm and a heated blanket over her knees. Her husband, a quiet man named Douglas who coaches Little League and rarely raises his voice, was standing beside her with his cap in his hands and an expression I recognized as controlled fear. "Lorene," Winifred said when she saw me. Her voice was rough. "Don't you dare cry." "I'm fine." "You're not fine, you're in a hospital bed." "Same thing at my age." I pulled up a chair and took her hand, and we sat there while Douglas went to find the doctor, and the machines beeped softly and the fluorescent lights hummed above us. After a moment, Winifred said, "They think it might be the apple butter." "I know," I said. She looked at me. "The jar," I said. "It was from my daughter." Winifred didn't say anything for a moment. Then she squeezed my hand. "What do you mean? She sent it." "In the mail. Out of nowhere. After over a year of not speaking. No explanation, just, 'Here, Merry Christmas.' I didn't know what to make of it, so I brought it in. I wasn't going to eat it until I understood what was going on. I thought I was being paranoid." I stopped. My voice had gone unsteady. "Winifred, I'm so sorry. I had no idea." "Hush," she said. "You didn't know. You couldn't have known." But I couldn't let go of it that easily, because here's the thing that was circling in my mind, that I hadn't let myself look at directly until that moment in that hospital room. My daughter had known when she sent that jar that I don't eat cinnamon. I developed a sensitivity 7 years ago. Not a full allergy, but enough that cinnamon gives me severe stomach cramps within an hour. My daughter grew up watching me pick it out of things, scrape it off pastries, send back spiced cider at restaurant tables. She knew, she had always known, and she'd sent me apple butter, seasoned, I was certain now, with more than a homemade recipe's usual amount. The doctor came in, a young man named Dr. Fitch who spoke carefully and looked me in the eye when he talked. He said Winifred had shown signs consistent with ingesting a concentrated irritant. They were waiting on lab work, but they wanted to know if there was any remaining product from the jar that could be tested. I told him the jar was at the church. I called Pastor Hendricks on the spot and asked him to seal it. Don't let anyone else touch it. Keep it exactly where it was until someone could come for it. Then I stepped out into the hallway, found a quiet corner by the vending machines, and called my son. He answered on the second ring, which surprised me. It was 11 in the morning in Portland. I told him about the jar. I told him about Winifred. I told him about the cinnamon. There was a long silence. "Mom," he said finally, "are you sure? That's a serious accusation." "I know what it is," I said. "I'm not accusing anyone yet. I'm telling you what happened." Another silence. "What are you going to do?" "I'm going to call the police," I said. "And then I'm going to call your sister." I don't know what I expected when I called her. I'd rehearsed it in my head 3 different ways. Walking back down the hallway, I thought she might hang up. I thought she might cry. I thought she might go cold and controlled the way she does when she's backed into a corner. She answered on the 4th ring. When she heard my voice, she said, "Mom." And something in the way she said it, not surprised, not relieved, but something more like braced, made me go very still. "I need you to tell me about the apple butter," I said. "Beat. What about it? Winifred is in the hospital. Miami Valley, she ate some of it this morning." Silence. And then, quietly, "What?" "Your friend from church," I said. I was keeping my voice level. I gave the jar to the bake sale. "She bought it. She's in the hospital now, with severe cramping and nausea, and they're testing the contents." More silence. Longer this time. "I didn't eat it," I said, "because I was waiting. I didn't understand why you sent it. And I wanted to understand before I— Mom." Her voice broke on the word, just fractured right down the middle. "Mom, I didn't know. I didn't know what was in it. He made it. He made it. He made it, and he told me to send it to you. He packed the box himself. He wrote out the tag himself. He said he wanted to do something to make things right between us." I believed him. I leaned against the cold wall of that hospital hallway and closed my eyes. Her husband. I'd never trusted him. Not from the beginning. Not from the first time I met him 8 years ago at a barbecue in her backyard. The way he'd talked over her without seeming to notice he was doing it. The way she'd gotten smaller and quieter in the years since the wedding. The 14 months of silence that had begun. I now understood, not long after I'd told her privately that I was worried about her. That I thought he was controlling her. That I was there whenever she needed me. 3 weeks later, she'd stopped returning my calls. "Did you know what was in it?" I asked. I had to ask, even though I already believed her. "No," she said. "I swear to God. I thought I thought he was trying. I thought maybe I was wrong about him. About everything." A pause, a shaking breath. "Mom, I'm so scared." "I know," I said. "Are the girls with you?" "They're at school." "Okay. I want you to go to your neighbor's house, Mrs. Trent, on the corner. You've always trusted her. Don't go home first. Don't call him. Just go to Mrs. Trent's and wait for me to call you back. Can you do that?" A long pause. Then, "Yes. Go now," I said. "I love you. I love you too, Mom." I hung up and stood there for a moment with my hand pressed flat against the cold painted wall, steadying myself. Then I walked to the nurse's station and asked to use a phone. And I called the Dayton Police Department's non-emergency line, and I reported what I knew. What followed was not fast or clean the way it is in movies. It was slow and procedural and exhausting in the specific way that dealing with institutions always is. An officer came to the hospital. Another went to the church to collect the jar. My daughter went to Mrs. Bart Trent's house and sat at a kitchen table she'd never sat at before and called a domestic violence hotline. Not because she'd been physically hurt, though I would later learn there were other things, quieter things, that I hadn't known about, but because she finally needed to say out loud what she'd been living with and have someone help her think. The lab results came back the following morning. The apple butter contained a significant concentration of nutmeg oil, far beyond what any recipe would call for. Concentrated nutmeg in large quantities is toxic. It causes nausea, vomiting, cramping, and in serious cases, cardiac symptoms. Winifred had eaten enough to get very sick. I hadn't eaten any. He had known about the cinnamon. He'd known I wouldn't eat it. He'd assumed I'd give it to someone else, or that it would sit on my counter unopened. Either outcome suited him. What he hadn't known, hadn't planned for, was that I'd bring it to a church bake sale, and that my friend would buy it. My son-in-law was arrested 4 days after Christmas. He was charged with 2 counts, the assault on Winifred, and the attempted poisoning of me, which the investigators confirmed based on the evidence they found in his kitchen and, later, on his phone. There were search results. There were purchases. There was a record of a man who had been planning something for a long time. Winifred recovered fully. She was home before New Year's, and she called me from her couch to tell me she was eating plain crackers and watching Jeopardy and that I was not, under any circumstances, to feel guilty. "You didn't know," she said for the third time, with the patience of a woman who has known me for 30 years and understands that telling me something once is never sufficient. "I'm working on it. My daughter filed for divorce in January. She and the girls came to stay with me for 3 weeks while she found her footing. And those 3 weeks were some of the strangest and most precious weeks I've had in years. Strange because of how much had happened. Precious because of how simple it felt. Underneath all of it, her daughters at my kitchen table doing homework, my daughter on the couch in her socks watching television with me, the three of us making pancakes on Saturday morning without anyone having to explain anything. Her older girl, who is 9 and very serious, asked me one morning while I was washing up if I had a recipe for apple butter. I didn't miss a beat. "I do," I said, "but I think this winter we'll try something different." "What do you think about strawberry jam?" She considered this gravely. "Strawberries better," she said. "I think so too. I've thought a lot, in the months since, about that jar sitting on my counter. About the moment I decided not to open it. About how my caution, which I had been half ashamed of, which had felt like failing to trust, like being uncharitable, like letting old wounds make me cold, had turned out to be the thing that mattered. I don't say that with any satisfaction. There's nothing satisfying about discovering that your fear was right. But I've also thought about what came after. My daughter sitting across from me at the same kitchen table where I'm sitting right now, the snow long since gone and the window open to the first warm air of April, telling me things she'd been holding alone for years. I thought about what it means to still be here, to have a second chance, not because anything was resolved cleanly, but because enough things broke at the right time to let in some air. I'm not the woman I was before all of this. I'm older, I think, in ways that don't show up in a mirror. More careful, more grateful. Some days the anger still comes. Not at my daughter, not anymore, but at the years lost, the months of silence, the things I didn't know were happening in that house where my granddaughters were growing up. But most days, this is what I come back to, the 9-year-old at my kitchen table, very serious, deciding in favor of strawberry. That is enough. For now, it is more than enough.